Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about designing multi-party call flows with conference. This is, you can think of Twilio's 102, mangling calls for fun and profit. If you guys have already started developing a little bit on Twilio, built your first kind of couple apps, thrown some calls in the top and had them do some stuff, and you're interested in, okay great, like how do I package these into some kind of robust call flows that I can then turn into a product, and a product I can turn into cash for my customers, right? So that's what we're going to be covering today. As Devin said, my name is Andrew Jordan. I'm a product manager for Conference and our Voice Core product. And before that, spent the last 2 years building hundreds of different Twilio applications with our customers in the field.
Hi everyone, I'm Ameya. I'm the conference lead at Twilio, and I worked on the voice stack for the past 3 years.
Great. So let's get into it. So let's first we're going to talk about what we mean by multi-party. We've said it like 5 or 6 times already. What does that mean? What features does this call flow unlock? And this isn't really features in the Twilio sense, kind of like the raw APIs, but how can you take some of those APIs, bundle them together, and turn them into features that you can use in your own software? What use cases lend themselves to a multi-party call flow? So how do you take those features and then turn them into something you can sell? And lastly, and most importantly, how do you implement these features in my application? So we're going to talk about kind of request by request, how you do some of these things. We're going to have a little demo, and we're going to talk about some of the new features we've been launching over the last week. Cool. So first, multi-party. What does it mean? Well, let's talk about what is not multi-party. So the traditional call comes in, you serve a call, some TWIML, dials out to someone else. That's like the two-party, really standard Twilio call flow. And it's really, really nice. It's super, super simple. Your application doesn't even really need to track the state of your participants. If you build out your state machine, you can kind of drop in a call at the top, and you can kind of think of it like a pachinko machine. It just kind of bounces down and ends up in a number of known states. And your application doesn't really need to intervene at any point. And this is what you think about dial number, dial client, and dial SIP. Multi-party is kind of a whole different paradigm. It's kind of like the second architecture on Twilio. It uses conference. It requires your application to know where each call is at any given time and the state of the call, but it's incredibly robust. It allows you to do really anything you can imagine to a call, like pull people together, throw them together, bring in extra legs with audio, kind of like whatever you want to do with your call flows. So what kind of features does multi-party unlock? When we see our customers do hold, warm and cold transfer, supervisory monitoring, and barging, these are all accomplished using multi-party call flows and conference. And kind of how do I make money with this, right? So the things that our customers do and then sell, they build inbound contact support centers this way. They build outbound sales contact centers and sales tools. They build lead management platforms, incident management platforms. The list could go on, but those are the 4 most common. So let's get a little technical. So this is a circle. It's also a mental model for a conference. And when you say the word conference, as I've been saying over and over again, you kind of have the idea of a conference call. So you have 40 or 50 people in a call together. No one's really listening. Half the people are muted doing something else. That is a conference, but it's not the conference we're talking about. When we're talking about conferences in this talk, you think of this conference as a container. And this is a container you're going to use to put people into, to pull them out of. And it's kind of a continuous media session. And the flows we're talking about that are going to contain really no more than 3 people. We also do the other kind of conferences, but that's another talk, which would probably be less interesting. So to start off, to build a mental model of how we operate on people, operate on participants in a conference, first we need to get them in. So we're going to talk about a couple common ways where you can get A and B into a conference together, and from having A and B in a conference, you can begin to operate on them. So that's pretty legible. All right, so there are 2 ways to get someone into a conference. First is the inbound kind of the inbound flow, and this is really common for your support call centers or anything where you have agents sitting ready and people unexpectedly call in and need you to do things for them. So as you can see, for the first caller who's coming in, this is the consumer. We're going to serve them some conference TWIML to put them in support ID 1234. We're going to give them a wait URL, which is going to play some soothing music. And then your application is going to go in, find the right agent, and once that agent is acknowledge they're ready, we're going to dial out to them and serve them the bottom TWIML, puts them in the same conference, bridge them together, they're talking, your agent soothes your furious customer, and life is good. So we can also kind of reverse this call flow. This is for like sales tools or other things where your agent is ready to engage to take a call, and then you're going to dial out to someone who's not expecting the call necessarily. So you're going to start with an outbound API call to a sales agent. That sales agent picks up, puts them in a conference. They're now ready. And then the second API call goes out, calls some person you want to talk to for some reason, and when they pick up, puts them in the conference, and the two can talk. So this kind of sets the stage for the actions that we're going to talk about later. But just so you have a mental model, A, B, in a conference together, now we're going to do stuff to them. So we're going to talk, before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the APIs we've built and why we did it. So I really enjoy this photo. It's this notion of a desire path. Are you guys familiar with this term? Right? It's like you build this thing, you're like, it would be great if we had this circle and this beautiful greenery in the middle, and then we made people walk around it so they could appreciate the greenery. Turns out no one cares. They're going to walk straight through it, right? They're going to trample down your plants. So this is kind of what we encountered with Conference. When we first built it, we thought about it as that big container for like 40 to 250 person conferences, and we built APIs that kind of like assumed that that's what people would do. And then as the platform matured and we had more people come on, we realized that people really wanted it as a container for multi-party call flows. So as we realized that change in what people wanted, we started to develop APIs around it. So Amaya will go a little more into detail. But so we're looking at simplifying things like this is kind of a hold on hold method, pre-refactoring and pre-launching hold as an official API. And this is what it refactors down to once we kind of codify that desire path we saw that our customers were taking and built a first-party API for it. Cool. So now Amaya is going to take you through the building blocks for Conference.
Thank you, Andrew. So Andrew talked about why you would want to build multi-party use cases. I'll talk through a couple of tools we have today that can help you build multi-party use cases, as well as 2 new APIs we are launching today. So let's start with the easiest API, the mute API. As the name suggests, you can use this to mute or unmute a conference participant. All it is a post to the participant sub-resource with a Boolean parameter. If muted equals true, you mute the participant. If muted equals false, you unmute them. Now let's move on to another API that is commonly used by most developers at Twilio today, and that's the transfer API. It's a very powerful and flexible way to manipulate any call in Twilio, including conference calls. So it's a post to the calls resource, and it takes a URL as a parameter. The URL points to a TWIML document that the participant's call flow will be redirected to when this call is complete. So you can build a variety of use cases using this building block. In fact, over the years, developers have built some amazingly complex call flows using this API. For example, if you want to put a participant on hold, you would use the transfer API to transfer them out of the conference, play some kind of hold music, and then when you're ready to bring them back in, you would use the API again, use the dial conference TWIML to bridge them back into the conference. Now this works, but it's not exactly optimal because you lose context in the conference. So for example, when you call the list API to list the participants in the conference when a participant is on hold, you will not see the participant that is on hold because they're actually not technically part of the conference. You've transferred them out. So to address this, we are launching the hold API, which to make the participant hold a first-class citizen in the API. And this looks very similar to the transfer API. It also takes a URL, but it also takes a Boolean parameter, hold equals to true or false. And this makes it very easy for you to put a participant on hold and bring them back into the conference. And as an additional benefit, you don't lose context. When you list the participants of this conference, you will see all the participants regardless of whether they are on hold or not with a hold status. So one thing I sort of glossed over is you will need the conference string ID or the conference SID. It's a unique ID that Twilio assigns each conference to be able to use these APIs. So how do you obtain this conference SID of an ongoing conference? So today, most developers use the API to poll the API for their in-progress conferences to get at the SID. And this works, again, but is not optimal. Some might even call it hacky. So to address this, we are also launching conference events. So conference events are just webhooks that will be fired by Twilio to notify your application about all the state changes that occur throughout the conference. So your app can choose to be notified about things like participants joining, leaving, being muted, being on hold, taken off hold, etc. So the payload of each webhook looks something like this. You have the name of the conference. You have the conference SID or the conference ID, which I just mentioned is super critical to do any manipulations on the conference. So once you get the event for a participant join, for example, you can store away this SID in your database and use it later to manipulate the conference. And obviously, you also have the status callback event, which in this case is the participant join. So we'd like to make all this real, put these two APIs together and show you a small demo. Andrew's going to come in and do that.
Cool. So we're going to walk through the warm transfer scenario, or as I like to call it, the I'd like to speak to the manager scenario. So when you are calling in somewhere, you're not quite getting what you want, and you would like to yell at someone from a little higher pay grade. So we're going to start with this little dashboard that's just showing all the conferences which are active. So Amaya is going to call in. Amaya, in this case, is going to be the customer support agent. I'm going to be an aggrieved customer. And my colleague in the back, Nico, is going to be our escalation manager. Cool. So Amaya is calling in. So we saw that we got the create and a join event. Now I'm going to call in as well. Great. I'm joined up.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Amaya. So I'm flying on Owl Air, and I missed my flight because you guys canceled it because you're operationally bad. I would like a new flight and some bonus miles, and if you could throw in a pony, that would be fantastic. Can you do that?
That sounds entirely reasonable. Let me put you on hold and talk to my manager about it.
Great. So now I'm going to get put on hold. I'm going to hear some really jazzy, soothing music. And then our escalation manager is going to call in. No. He's calling in. He's dialing. I see him. Phone's out. Great. So they're all joined. So they're going to have a quick conversation about how unreasonable my demands are. Great. So now we're going to unhold it. And now all three of us are talking. Hello? Where's my pony?
Hello, Mr. Jordan. I have an executive suite on our first class lounge. We have a free drinks on our air bar.
You know what?
I think that will make it up for the delay.
Yeah, that'll work for it. Yeah, I'll stay on the line so you can collect my information. Not a pony, but it's close. Great. So now that I've been satisfied as an angry customer, we can drop off, and as we drop off, the events come in and clean up the conference state. Cool. So that makes it real, and we'll walk through exactly kind of what we did there and what the APIs were. So I'll let Amaya take that.
Yep. So how exactly did we implement this demo using the APIs I talked about earlier? So we have the customer and the agent join the conference, dial into the conference, and you will see the event at the bottom there being emitted to your application. And so your application can store away the conference id for later use. As we saw, the conversation didn't go too well, so we decided to bring in the escalation manager or supervisor. So the customer is then put on hold using the REST API I mentioned with hold equals to true as the parameter. And your application will also get a participant hold event at this point in time. So your application can know what state each participant is in. Now we'll call out to C, who joins, and we also get another participant join event to your application, just as we did for the previous two participants. Now the customer, the agent, and the supervisor talk to each other. They decide that the supervisor needs to come into the conference. So we remove the customer from hold by using the API, hold API again. Very simple again, hold equals false will bring the customer back in to the conference. And now each of the three parties can talk to each other, be introduced to each other. The agent can then drop off, and you will get a participant leave notification to your app, which you can also store to maintain state of the conference. Woo! So that's it.
Yeah, state tracking.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to talk about like one more scenario. This one's a little creepy, but happens to you all the time. You just don't ever know it. So in a call center, right, you need to constantly manage agents to make sure they're performing the way they're supposed to, the way they're scripted to, they're staying on message. And a lot of the ways you do that is you'll have someone watch in on them as a muted participant, right? So customer A will be joining, agent B will be joining, and supervisor C will be joined as well, but will just kind of be hanging out there listening. And this, like, depending on the call center, this goes a couple different ways. Sometimes like B and C are like chatting with each other. So as B says something they shouldn't, C will just like click. Don't do that. But if you need to have C barge in and like immediately be able to talk, you can do that as well. So right now, because we have mute equals true on C, they're muted at the mixer. So no matter what audio C is coming in, whether their phone is muted or not, they're not in the mix. And then if they decide that they need to become unmuted, they post to our API, and they're unmuted, and now all three can talk. So let's just walk that through one more time, like with the eventing. So A joins, we get an event, we store it. B joins, we get an event, we store it. C joins on mute. We get an event too, which I should add that. C can hear A and B, but A and B cannot hear C. Then we post out to Twilio, tell them to unmute it. Now all three can talk. The agent can steer the call back into an appropriate direction, and everything's good. Cool. So these are like two really, really common call center scenarios, and they're also kind of the most complex scenarios that you run into in a call center. So most other hold and transfer scenarios are like less complicated subset of the two scenarios we've already talked through. And also, as we mentioned, because you have the ability to transfer, because you have this hold API, any other bizarre transfer scenario you may need to come up with, you can click them together and make that happen. So in summation, conference is where we see most of our customers build their really robust multi-party call flows. We see thousands and thousands of Twilio customers building call flows this way. And since we're seeing all these customers use conference as a container for multi-party call flows, we've done a little bit of development with events and hold to make that development experience much, much better. And we're continuing to think about ways to make that even better. We have a few things we've already planned, but we also would love to hear from you guys about things that we may not do yet that you'd love to see either streamlined or made available within conferencing. So that's the end of our talk. We cannot wait to see what you will build with this. Afterwards, Amaya and I will be right to the left of the stage. If you have any questions about what's good about conference, what's bad about conference, or related, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.